Hello ladies and latents, and welcome to another countdown. Last time I covered my favorite boss battles from the Pokemon RPGs, and this time I'm covering the ones that I like the least. There are plenty of reasons I could like a boss battle in the Pokemon series, but there are probably even more reasons to dislike one. The context in the story, the character, lack of satisfaction, difficulty or lack thereof, or generally shitty design could all slap a battle onto this list. I should probably point out that no, these bosses are not as awful as I'm going to be playing them up to be. With the recent Monster Hunter list, I used a lot of hyperbole for the sake of entertainment, and I intend to do a similar thing here. There are a few really shitty battles here for sure, but for the most part this is simply my opinion blown out of proportion. When it comes down to it, this list is pretty self-explanatory, so there's no need to further drag out this intro. Let's get rolling already. You know what sucks? Lazily repeated boss fights. You know what sucks more? Lazily repeated boss fights one after another, which is exactly the case with Chobin from Gale of Darkness. At this point in Gale of Darkness, you're simply running an errand to get an upgrade for your scooter. Your scooter gets stuck in the sand, and the solution is to make it a hover bike. Simple enough, but Chobin, the village idiot that he is, decides to pick a fight with you, throwing out a Sunkern and a Gyarados. Well, isn't that just lame, not to mention easy? Oh, but don't you worry, shit gets real when he brings out Robo-Groudon, which you don't fight in any capacity. No, instead you're still fighting Chobin, this time piloting a mech suit to awkwardly throw at his new team of 4 Pokemon. He's got Sunflora, Gyarados, Tropius, and Hoppip. This team sucks, to put it simply. It's really bad when one of your 4 Pokemon is completely useless, 2 of them are mediocre as hell, and the last one is only good for spamming one powerful attack. Ugh, I would have rather fought a fake Groudon like a mystery dungeon than this. The thing about this fight that gets it on here is that it's pointless. The only reason you ever fight Chobin is because he's a moron who is trusted to pilot a mech suit that isn't even being used properly, not to mention is riddled with design problems. And what's the point of using a mech suit for battle if you're just gonna sit in it and use Pokemon to fight for you? It doesn't improve their capabilities, it doesn't even partake in the battle, it just throws balls for him. If you're going to build a robot Groudon, then give it the ability to fight instead of making it a glorified pitching machine. So in Pokemon Black and White, Ghetsis had this team of ninjas by his side at almost all time. They were like his own personal winter soldiers. Winner. In Black 2 and White 2, you encounter them much more often than in the first game. In fact, you actually get to battle them. And when you do, you fight all 3 of them one after another and sweep them. Good. After they followed you around the entire game being generally intimidating and ninja-like, you'd expect the Shadow Trio to do some good in battle. You'd think that fighting them would be this crazy and fun challenge, but instead it's a clean sweep. Divided between them, they have 6 Pawniards, an Absol, an Excelgor, and a Baynet. Their unique Pokemon are alright, but that leaves them with only 1 worthwhile Pokemon apiece. How am I supposed to take this trio of ninjas seriously when the only thing that puts up a decent fight against a fire type or a fighting type is a Baynet? Where did that intimidation factor go? I just cleanly swept through 3 ninjas without breaking a sweat. You can make the argument these 3 are just Ghetsis' pawns, and you know what? I'd agree. All they use are pawns. This little gauntlet against the Shadow Triad as a whole is flat out disappointing. You'd expect something that comes after Colress, the wall in front of Ghetsis, a trio of motherfucking ninjas, to be somewhat decent in a fight, but instead, they go down like little bitches. Pokemon X and Y had one of the weaker sets of gym leaders when it came to characterization. Beyond a few goofy outfits, a lot of them had very little personality, and even when they did, you never got to interact with them for very long. They all had very small teams that were very easy to take out and tended to be pretty underwhelming as a whole. However, Olympia takes this to the next level. The correct question to ask here would be, Olympia? Who's that again? And I wouldn't be able to answer because, to be honest, I don't even know who this person is. It really goes to show how unmemorable you are when I'm looking up candidates for this list and I'm surprised to see you next to the rest of the gym leaders. Literally, the only thing Olympia has going for her is a decently pretty gym. Beyond that, there's nothing interesting to speak of. Her character? What character? She just stands there being all, I'm psychic and therefore I have to be mellow as fuck, want to fight? And even for this game's standards, her team is really weak. Sigilyphs and Slowking are really good choices, but her signature Pokemon is a goddamn Meowstic, a Pokemon you've already seen before being used by another boss character, your rival. It's not special and it goes down without a hitch. And when you're done, you'll probably forget that this character, this gym, and this battle ever happened. Her design is pretty cool though. That's it. That's the fight. Okay, seriously, why is this battle a thing? I get that Pokemon Yellow is supposed to be referential to the anime. You start with a Pikachu, Jesse and James harass you, you get access to all the starters, fine. But who in the goddamn world was so stupid that they thought that Lieutenant Surge from the anime would make sense in a gameplay setting? All Lieutenant Surge has is a single Raichu with Thunderbolt, Growl, Mega Punch, and Mega Kick. Seems like it could do some damage, right? Wrong. At this point in the game, you have access to several ground types, and if you're using any of them, you have a distinct advantage over his Raichu. Shoot, in the town before this, you got the Dig TM, which gives you an easy ground type move for your non-ground ground types to use. Even in the original games he was pathetically easy to beat, but I guess they wanted to castrate him even further. Poor bastard's been made into a one-hit kill boss fight. I don't see easiness as an issue in bosses usually, but this is just stupid. Implementing ideas from the anime to change the game slightly? Sure, go ahead, as long as it doesn't fuck anything up. Making Lieutenant Surge into an even bigger bitch than he was originally just for the sake of a reference? Why the living hell would anyone think that's a good idea?
Let me set the stage for this one. Fuck you.
You're playing Pokemon Black and White, you get to Nimbasa City. You hear rumors floating around that the gym leader uses electric-type Pokemon. Step back out to the desert and grab a ground-type Pokemon since, you know, ground is electric's only weakness. Sure enough, you get to the gym armed with your chocolate Totodile and you see Blitzels and Emolgas. Oh, good. This is what gets me about Elisa. Yeah, the gym is pretty cool, yeah, she's got a nice design, and yeah, she's a bit of a charming character, but goodness gracious, the fight is annoying. Having ground-type Pokemon would normally help you out against electric types, but they decided to make this game's Pikachu knock off an electric flying type, so the egg is on your face for expecting that strategy to work. I mean, sure, having a ground-type Pokemon might let you take 1 or 2 more hits from these Emolgas, but good luck hitting back considering both of them have friggin' static. On the subject of static, fuck that ability. Why is it that abilities like that always work for the opponent but not for you? That's some bullshit, isn't it? When you do draw out her Zebstrika, holy shit, get ready to hurt. With Flame Charge boosting its speed and some really high stats for this point in the game, this is a pretty tough Pokemon to take out. Though at the very least, having the type advantage against this one will help you more than it did against the Emolgas. Another thing that bothers me about her team is that it's so lacking in variety. Considering there are other electric types in the Unova region, you'd think her team would have a little more to it than 2 piss-annoying Pokemon and a Zebstrika. Tynum is a pretty shit Pokemon, but for what it's worth, there's Joltik, and if you want, you can make an argument for Clink being a worthy team member. Just something to surprise me and break up the tedium of getting through this gym full of almost entirely Emolgas and Blitzels. When you step back and think about it, this gym really is like an amusement park. The roller coasters may be fun to ride and the atmosphere might be cool, but the wait in line is irritating and no fun at all.
And now, back to Pro Jared with more silly analogies.
I love Team Rocket, that bunch of jokers. It's kind of endearing to see what's basically a mob in the Pokemon series, people that commit normal crimes like robberies and kidnappings rather than conquering the world or destroying the universe. After the original team is stomped by a mysterious young hero, Neo Team Rocket is trying to rebuild from the ground up by gathering resources, causing mayhem, and sending out a message to Giovanni with the radio tower in Goldenrod City. When you reach the top of the radio station to take down the big boss, you better not be expecting something cool like Giovanni because instead, you get Archer. Of all the anti-climaxes in the Pokemon series, this has got to be the worst offender. Granted, Team Rocket hasn't been too big of a threat throughout the game, but goodness gracious, you'd assume the leader would be at the very least tougher to take out than the average grunt. You'd think he'd come at you with a better team than his subordinates, but other than his slightly high-leveled Houndoom, both Ariana and Petrol could probably do a better job as an admin than him. Fucking Petrol, the guy with 5 coughings and a wheezing, puts up a better fight than him. That's just sad. I realize that repeatedly complaining about lack of difficulty might be a bit repetitive considering that's what a lot of these entries have been so far, but in contexts like this, where you're battling the head of a crime organization that has terrorized 2 entire countries, you'd think he would come off as a little more intimidating. Instead, he's just another joker in a team full of jokers. It's no wonder Giovanni didn't want to come back. You're all obviously incompetent. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, aside from Cynthia and a few other exceptions, had a pretty mediocre selection of boss battles. A lot of these are due to the Sinnoh region's lackluster selection of Pokemon or because the characters in the story weren't much of anything worth talking about. For me, the worst of these battles were those who were supposed to have type-specific teams, but made compromises due to the sloppy nature of the default regional Pokedex. There was Volkner, sure, and he was pretty bad at being an electric-type gym leader, but then we have Flint, a fire-type Elite Four member. Put that in giant quotes because I use that phrase very loosely. When researching candidates for this list, I used Bulbapedia as my main reference for information. It came time to look over Flint's team and talk about it, and the sad nature of the trivia section of his page is honestly funnier than anything I could write for this segment. Take a look. Although he specializes in fire types, in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, only 2 of the 5 Pokemon he uses are actually fire type, with only 8 fire type moves between them, and only 4 of these are actual attacking moves. Each of Flint's Pokemon knows at least 1 fire type move. In Pokemon Platinum, his entire team consists of his specialty type. With only 2 Pokemon of his type theme in Diamond and Pearl, he has the lowest number of Pokemon on his team that are of his specialty of all the Elite Four members.
What? Why? It's stuff like this that makes me want to go up to Game Freak, grab him by the shoulders, look him in the eye, and say, "What were you thinking?"
Game Freak, you put a fire type trainer in the Elite Four in a region with 2 fire types? Were you not paying attention to the game you were designing, or were you just high as balls for the entire development of the game? Well, considering some of the other shit that slipped through the cracks, this wouldn't surprise me. Remember how I said I wish NASCAR was the final battle of Pokemon Coliseum? Well, after that really great fight, we get this asshole taking the role of the main villain, providing one of the most frustrating final battles I've ever had to deal with. Let me be clear here. This one in particular is a very, very personal entry because of some past experiences I've had with the game. That said, Evis is still a bit of an anticlimax. Like I said, he comes right the hell out of nowhere after NASCAR, taking the role of the final battle. He's the main villain of the game for a whole one battle and isn't really built up in any capacity beyond one very brief cutscene. Not to say build up is something that every final battle needs to have to be good, but in an RPG, regardless of what you might think of stories in the Pokemon games, it's common practice in RPGs to have some sort of build up for a proper climax with the final battle. NASCAR had this, Evis did not. However, I can let it slide. What I can't let slide is several years of this guy busting my balls repeatedly. Let me set this scenario for you. I got Pokemon Coliseum when I was 8. I wasn't very old at the time of the game's release, so I wasn't entirely accustomed to how playing Pokemon works beyond kill everything that moves. I didn't catch a lot of Pokemon, and those that I did I only caught because they were stronger than what I had. It's like how most kids treat Pokemon games, except in this game in particular, that mindset does not work. You have very limited options in Pokemon Coliseum, so being a little kid and not knowing how to play the game properly or take advantage of your resources puts you at a significant disadvantage. I specifically remember that my strongest Pokemon by this point in the game were Espeon, Umbreon, Meganium, and Piloswine. Considering several of his Pokemon could resist what I was throwing at him, a lot of them are power-hitting Pokemon, and his Scizor has Silver Wind, you can see why this battle would frustrate 8-year-old me with no idea how to play Pokemon properly. Or 9-year-old me. Or 10-year-old me. Eventually, I just gave up on it because I couldn't be bothered to care anymore. Evis had pissed me off enough and the new generation of Pokemon was out, so I moved on. Guess how long it took for me to finally get over that slump, replay Pokemon Coliseum, and beat it properly. When I finally saw Coliseum's credits roll, I was 16 years old. The only reason I even bothered to go back and play it was because of Chugga Conroy's Let's Play at the time. In the end though, beating Evis was satisfying as hell. After years of frustration and bitterness with Coliseum, I beat Evis and I beat the game. I will still never properly get over this memories of frustration or how much Evis bothers me with his presence in the game, but my childhood story did eventually have a happy end to it. And it puts Steven back where he belongs as champion, booting Wallace off the throne he didn't deserve. But that's a rant for another day.
Well, it's another day.
Allow me to be blunt. Fuck this boss. If I were going to pick a least favorite boss battle in any game, let alone the Pokemon series, this would take the top of that list. And that's comparing it to a lot of other bosses from a lot of other games. But how could such a terrible boss exist in my favorite game of all time? What's so bad about it that I can throw aside my nostalgic feelings towards Pokemon Emerald and hate this boss so much? There's no bullshit here. I'm not playing this one up for shits and giggles. This is pure, unadulterated rage I'm letting out. Let's start with some context. Wallace is the final boss of Pokemon Emerald, like I said. Not Ruby and Sapphire or their remakes, just Emerald. One of the most well-rounded Pokemon games in the series with a lot of features and changes I really liked. Expand the story from Ruby and Sapphire? Hell yeah. More challenging bosses and new locales? Sounds good to me. Replacing Steven as the champion? Oh, I mean, you didn't have to do that. What was so wrong with Steven that they decided to axe him for the enhanced version of the game? And what made Wallace so special that they made him the replacement? There's no in-game justification for the change unless you play the remix and read the whole one conversation between Steven and Wallace. It was a whole decade late, but hey, I guess it counts for something. And even with that, there's another really irksome thing about this replacement. They replaced Steven with another water-type boss. In a game with water-centric villains, a water-type boss just a few hours before this in Juan, and a region that is covered with water, why the hell would you take a step back and make the final boss another water trainer? What were you thinking, Game Freak? Did you want people to complain about the water even more? And I cannot stand the fight against Wallace. If there were a poll to decide the most unfair battle in the Pokemon series, this would be my vote. Let's start with a comparison between the levels of his Pokemon and the levels of Sydney's. Sydney's lowest level Pokemon is 46. Wallace's highest level Pokemon is 58! That's a 12 level difference between 5 bosses. I usually like playing Pokemon under-leveled, give myself a fair challenge, but this is downright fucking ridiculous. I'm sure there's going to be people commenting, Wallace isn't that hard, you just have to grind. Or, Wallace isn't that hard, you just need to pick Sceptile as your starter. You know what that says to me? That says that in one way or another, you have to specifically prepare yourself for Wallace rather than building a properly balanced team to challenge the Elite Four with. I get that it's an RPG and you have to prepare strategies in advance for the tougher battles, but if your priority in building your team is for one boss out of 5, that doesn't come off as particularly fair, now does it? Oh, and what about this lovely lineup of Pokemon he has? There's a Ludicolo, solo with Double Team and Leech Seed for stalling, a Gyarados that can build up Dragon Dance for sweeping and counter its weaknesses with Earthquake, and to top all of this off, there's this fucking Milotic! This son of a bitch is the ultimate toxic staller. Milotic is a ridiculous tank on its own given its high defenses and HP, but give it Recover and Toxic and you have one hell of a time ahead of you.